Okay, joining us now, National Border Patrol Council President. He is Brandon Judd. Brandon, it's great to have you on. You've been talking about this. Critics have been saying this. It is complete and utter madness what's going on at the border, these critics say. 21-year high in illegal crossings, 2 million expected to break the law and cross illegally. It's about equal to adding Austin and Fort Worth, Texas combined. What's going on here?
Yeah, as it pertains to border security and public safety overall, this administration is a complete dumpster fire. When you look at the facts, when you couple apprehensions and gotaways, we're at an all-time high. When you look at the number of people that have been released into the United States being rewarded for violating our laws, we're at an all-time high. When you look at the money that the cartels are making, we're at an all-time high. When you look at the number of children that are dying because of drug overdoses, we're at an all-time high. All of this is border security, and this administration is doing nothing to help it. They're selling the American public down the river to appease their base, and it's hurting every single one of us when this issue could be solved very easily.
You said over the weekend that the Biden administration's policies are leading to the inhumane treatment of migrants. What did you mean by that?
It's the hypocrisy that you hear from this administration when they say that the Trump administration's policies were inhumane, having people wait in Mexico for their court hearings. And when they reversed that, what they did was they encouraged people to put themselves in the hands of human smugglers. They encouraged these people, these vulnerable individuals, these women and children, to put themselves in the hands of these dangerous cartels to be smuggled into the United States. These people are physically abused, they're sexually abused, and at times they're murdered. And that is not humane. And then when you consider that when these cartels, when we go after them and try to take them into custody to distract us, they'll just drop children in the river. And this is all policy driven, which again is inhumane. And that's hypocritical because they accuse the Trump administration of being inhumane. It's crazy.
Yeah, we hear you, and we were talking last week about how, the drug smugglers are the ones behind dropping toddlers over border walls or abandoning them in deserts or on highways in order to distract Border Patrol, move them away from parts of the border to get drugs across. The other thing is too, Brandon, it's really strange that the U.S. government is considering going door to door to talk about people who are unvaccinated when we've got a daily influx of thousands from Mexico and Central America and 150 countries around the world, and we're not worried about whether or not they're vaccinated. It just seems that, we have this new Delta variant of the virus exploding south of the border, and we're not supposed to talk about that?
And I personally want to thank you for bringing that up. I personally want to thank you for letting the American public know what's going on. When you talk about the Delta variant, when you talk about COVID-19 and the number of people that are coming into the United States illegally and those people being released into our population, they're encouraging the spread of the Delta variant. They're encouraging everything that is going on when they say that they want Americans to get vaccinated. Well, what's the point if we're just going to be releasing more and more people into the United States that could potentially be affecting our citizens?
Yeah, now they may get rid of Title 42, which would be really open door. I mean, that's what we're going to be watching for possibly by the end of the month. Democrats have literally been told by a court to do a rethink. We had the federal judge last week saying, listen, the Obama-era program protecting DACA immigrants from deportation, that was unconstitutional. Your reaction to that ruling?
I'm grateful that a court was willing to stand up and say that the President of the United States does not have the authority to legislate through executive order. It is up to the Congress to determine what laws get passed in the United States, and that's what that judge said. The judge didn't say that these people shouldn't be legalized. He just said that we have to have the legislature, we have to have Congress do its job and not the President try to usurp that power, and that's what President Obama in fact did.
All right, so now the Biden administration is going to appeal it, but it's a powerful constitutional argument the judge made. Your final word.
No, I believe that the Supreme Court is going to say that the Obama administration overstepped. I think that they're going to come back and say Congress must do their job. Again, we are the most compassionate country in the world. We should be the most compassionate country in the world, but we have to let the legislature do its job, not have the President of the United States usurp power.
Brandon, Judd, thank you so much for joining us.